gospel reading is Mark chapter 1, beginning with the 21st verse. And they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority, and not as the scribes. And immediately there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out,
"What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God."
But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. And they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying,
"What is this? A new teaching? With authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him."
And at once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding region of Galilee. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. And the fever left her, and she served them. That evening at sundown, the whole city was gathered together about the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And in the morning, a great while before day, he rose and went out to a lonely place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and they found him and said to him,
"Everyone is searching for you."
And a leper came to him, beseeching him, and kneeling, said to him,
"If you will, make me clean."
Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him,
"I will be clean."
And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. He went out and began to talk freely about it, and to spread the news, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in the country, and people came to him from every quarter. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Well, Happy New Year. I don't know what New Year traditions that you have in our family. For most of our 30 years of marriage, we've gone to Columbia, South Carolina, where we get together with two of my college buddies. It's kind of interesting. The three of us guys knew each other, like when we were college heathen. None of us at the time imagined that we'd be clergy, which we all are now. So our children have grown up together and have spent many New Years together. And two of these guys actually married women from Scotland, and so what we do at midnight is we sing multiple stanzas of Auld Lang Syne in Gaelic. I just have no idea what that's about, but we do it anyway, and it's great fun. And I remember when the children were little, some couldn't make it till midnight, but I think it was in the year 2000. The millennium was coming in. We thought we need to wake up the children, so the young children, we went and wakened them to come bring in the year. And after we sang Auld Lang Syne, Lisa had poured a little cup of champagne. Now, none of us like champagne or know anything about it. So there's always a cheap bottle of champagne. And so Lisa had poured this, and after we sang Auld Lang Syne, everybody took a sip of it, and it was just atrocious. And the way it played out then was on Sunday morning, we're in worship together, and it's one of those churches where they have a little children's sermon, so the children come down, and the pastor says, "Do you have a New Year's tradition in your family?" And my friend's daughter raises her hand and she says, "Yes, we do." It's been her first time. She said, "At New Year's, at midnight, we sing a song, and then we get a cup of champagne, and we all spit it out in the sink." And the church was puzzled about this. We have a tradition here at the turn of the year. It's actually amazing, I think. I've just been so struck, like I don't think I've ever been before. I mean, I'm old. I should have thought about all this before, but our Christmas time here is so beautiful and moving. And Christmas Eve, I was just struck by this again. Somebody took a photo. It's now on my Facebook page. It's my new favorite photo of myself. We had the communion table up here, and I'm the one that gets to stand behind it with the bread and the juice, and my head's bowed, but we're all gathered. And the sense at communion on Christmas Eve, right, is that all of us that are here, and it's thousands that come, that we're all gathered around the Lord's table, and I'm the lucky one, right? I'm the one that gets to return thanks, if you will, and it's just, what a privilege for me to get to do this. I've done it with you 13 Christmases now, and I was just struck this year by, one, how much I love you, but then also just God's love in doing this thing. I mean, this is amazing, right? God could have stayed in heaven, but God loved us so much. I don't want them to be alone. I want them to know me. I'll come down as a child so they'll know my heart, so they will love me in return. Just been so moved by that. At the turn of the year, then, we come and we think on this first Sunday of the year about the Magi coming in the dark. And it's actually interesting. We sing these songs. They're a waltz, aren't they? It's like, the first Noel, it's a waltz. We Three Kings, it's a waltz. And I guess it's the three-step because they bring three gifts. And it makes you want to dance, and you should dance because it's a great joy. In the darkness, there is this bright light. Jesus is the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness is not overcome it, and it's all just so moving. And the Magi bring their gifts to the Christ child. What does all this mean for us? And all the scripture passages that attach themselves to this are about God doing a new thing. Here we are at the new year. What's the new thing? What is this light to the world like? The story that Barbara and Melanie read, Jesus comes to Capernaum. This is amazing. He goes to the synagogue there. If you ever come to Israel with me, I'll take you to see this synagogue. It's remarkable. And when Jesus comes there, he begins teaching. And what the crowds say is he teaches as one who has authority. The Greek word is exousia, authority. It's an interesting word. It's different from power. You can have power and no authority whatsoever. I would say, like Richard Nixon had the power of the presidency until the day he left the Oval Office, but he had no authority in his latter days whatsoever. But who has authority? I think Pope Francis has great authority now. And it's not because he stands up and says, I am the Pope, you shall do what I say. That's not why the Pope has authority. This Pope has authority because of something we can detect in his inner being. He has a love for Jesus. He has a joyfulness in his eyes. He seems to just have compassion and a heart for everyone. I mean, that's what we work on here at church together, right? It's not our exterior life that everyone can see. It's not about having more power in the world. It's about having an inner heart that is close to Jesus. Like there's authority, there's exousia in that. We're going to work on that together this year. Jesus begins with a round of healing, and the healings are interesting, and the early ones all involve him silencing evil voices. They're evil voices, and Jesus tells them, it's very interesting. The various English translations say things like be quiet, be silent, but the Greek is actually a ruder kind of term that you might not say in public. I don't know about you, I was raised by my mother never to say shut up. I just said it in front of hundreds of people. Do not tell my mother. And Jesus, in effect, says to these evil voices, I mean, he's not polite about it. With a rude, he says, shut up, hush. And what are these evil voices? And I wonder if there aren't evil voices today that Jesus would say, hush to. I mean, we live in a world where we're supposed to listen to everyone's voice. I mean, I know that, but there's so much evil chatter out there. And there's the point where, as the people of God, we hear Jesus say, shut up. I mean, there's all the stuff in the media, you watch movies, and so much of it is so tawdry and so trashy, and we need to hear Jesus say, shut up. And maybe we get up and we turn the TV off. I mean, people complain about, the gun culture, but the fact is, if all Christians in America said we're not going to watch shoot-'em-up movies and TV shows, they wouldn't put any on the air. It's out there because we watch it. We say there's too much sex on TV, but if we got up and turned the thing off, we said, hush, we're not going to have that. There are all these news outlets now, and actually a lot of the politicians, that what they talk is actually evil because they play on fear, and they foster prejudice, and they stir up anger. And for these kinds of voices, Jesus says, shh, hush. Or maybe you're just in random conversation with people and you're standing around talking and somebody says something that's degrading to someone else. You're just used to this. It's the way people talk. But maybe this is the year that you go, quiet. We're not going to hear this. Maybe somebody makes a subtly racist remark. Maybe somebody's passing some gossip along. And we're just playing along always, aren't we? But maybe this is the year that we go, shh, no. Here's one for you. For the year 2016, try this. Never say, bless her heart. Because when you say bless her heart, you're not wanting to bless her heart. You're pitying her. You're maybe passing along a little bit of gossip. You're actually passing a little subtle judgment on her. Oh, bless her heart. Try going for a year without saying that. All these voices that should be silenced, the worst may be actually the voices that are in your head. You have voices in your head and you're passing judgment on somebody else, or there's some poisonous thought that you have on your head, or maybe it's a lustful thought in your head, and Jesus says, shh, hush, shut up. Or maybe it's those voices in your head that say, you're no good. They're going to find you out. They know who you are. You can't do it. Jesus says, shh, you're my child. I love you. Don't listen to those voices. Jesus heals. If you come to me to Capernaum, the other thing that I can show you is the home of Simon Peter. Jesus stayed there when he was in Capernaum. He preaches there. He heals there. Small little home. Archaeologists discovered it a few decades back. I got to see it not long after it had been discovered. It's really cool. And then what they always do in the Holy Land is when they find a sacred site, they build a church on top of it. And the churches are often very tacky. This particular church takes the cake. Go home and Google it. The church on top of the home of Simon Peter in Capernaum looks like the Millennium Falcon. And a few of you are thinking, what is the Millennium Falcon? The Millennium Falcon is a starship in the Star Wars movies. And in case you don't know about the Millennium Falcon, I looked up the Star Wars database to describe to you the Millennium Falcon. Now, before I read this to you, let me just say that I like this idea that there was a home. It was the home where Simon Peter and his mother-in-law lived, and they built a church on top of it. I like this idea that the foundation of a church is a home. We have a great big church, but we try to make it be like a home. We're a family here together. The basis of a church is a home, but then the nature of this church. Here's what it says in the Star Wars database about the Millennium Falcon. It is shabby. It's a worn-out junker. It's unpredictable. It has humble origins. It has flaws, but it is deeply beloved. And for Han Solo and Chewbacca, it is home. Now, the church is like that. We're a little bit shabby. We have humble origins, and we're so flawed. Sometimes people come to me and they tell me, you want to know what's wrong with the church? I'm like, the list is long. I know way more than you do. Trust me. That we're deeply flawed, but yet it's God's church, and it is our home. And the Millennium Falcon is part of many great victories, and we're part of many great victories when Jesus is here. And the first great victories are these healings. I don't know what you make about the healings. Jesus heals people who are very ill. And one of the things we do in church is we pray for people that are very ill, and I don't know how that goes for you. I've probably prayed for more sick people than most of you, given my advanced age and what I do for a living. And what I find is that once in a while, there's some miraculous healing. But most of the time, disease seems to kind of run its course, and we don't know what to make of that. I can think of times in my life there's been an amazing healing. I have a close friend. In 1977, we were students at Duke, and he got a call one day that his mother back in Texas had been diagnosed with this inoperable cancer, and she'd be dead within 6 months. And she's still alive today. Doctors can't explain it. It's a miracle. We hear that, and we say, oh, it's a miracle, it's great. But then just so often, God doesn't seem to do that. Jesus is so interesting. When Jesus comes to Capernaum, it says he healed many people, but it doesn't say he healed every person. There were still people there with arthritis, and people there that had cancer, and people with Alzheimer's. God, it just doesn't work. I don't know what we make of this. And I wonder sometimes if there aren't sort of some small miracles in the middle of the struggle that we don't notice or take account of, because we're looking for the big miracle, right? But maybe there's smaller miracles all along there that help us to get through all of this. What's really of interest to me today in this, though, is the way Jesus heals. Simon's mother-in-law is sick, and it says Jesus took her by the hand. And then there's a leper, and in the ancient world, you didn't touch lepers. In fact, when a leper came up, you turned and you ran, because nobody wanted to catch leprosy from the lepers. And so nobody touched a leper. And the real miracle of the story, I don't think, is so much that the leper got better, but it says that Jesus reached out and touched him. Nobody touched lepers. How should we say it? Christians heal by touch. The church heals by touch. I'm going to push you very hard on this in the year 2016. I'm going to challenge every one of us, instead of mailing it in or sending it in or praying at some distance, I want all of us to touch somebody that we would not normally touch. I'm going to push you hard on this, and I can just warn you in advance, don't bring me something to give to the poor. I've done this for years. People bring me, oh, I got a ham at work. Here, James, give it to a poor person. I've said, thank you so very much. And then I got work to do, right? And from now on, what I'm going to do is if you come to me and you say, I got this, will you give it to a poor person? I'm going to say, sorry, I don't want to deprive you of the real blessing. You can figure it out. Like you figure out how to buy a nice car and you figure out how to have great vacations. You figure out all this great stuff in your world. I'm sure you can figure out how to connect with somebody who needs this. And when you do it, you'll be blessed. You see, we forget about the power of the touch. The program I'm doing Tuesday night on the Pope, there's so many things that are fascinating about him. And one is the people that he has touched. So one that we're going to see photos of in my program is a guy who lived in northern Italy named Vinicio Riva. And Vinicio Riva suffers from this disease called neurofibromatosis. It's a neurological disorder, and in some people it manifests itself in these growths in the skin. And so this is the case with Vinicio. And so for all of his life, wherever he's gone, people make fun of him, they ridicule him, or they turn their gaze, they won't look at him, they won't speak to him, they won't sit next to him on the bus. If he's in the grocery store, people flee to the next aisle. He's been mistreated all of his life. He wanted to go and see the new Pope. So when he got there, the Pope saw him in the crowd and summoned him to come forward. And Vinicio came forward trembling a little, and the Pope reached out and put his arms around him and held him. Not briefly. He held him for a long time, and he kissed him on the head. And Vinicio said, it was like paradise. I felt my heart soaring out of my body. And I thought about that, like who was blessed there? And you could say, oh, the Pope blessed Vinicio. But if we could ask the Pope, I think the Pope would say, I was blessed by that. But I have another answer to who was blessed, and who was blessed, like I, James Howell, was blessed when I saw that. And now actually you've been blessed because I told you about it. See, the power of the touch. We got to get over this idea that we, the haves, are going to help the have-nots. We're the ones that are smart and have all the resources, and they're the people that, oh, they're just broken, and we're going to go and help them, and then we feel noble about ourselves. The fact is, we're all broken, and we all have resources and gifts, and we all can be blessed, and it's just a matter of making that connection and touching each other. I read a book by Sam Wells, who's a pastor over in London over the break, and he talks a lot about this, and one of the things that he points to is in this very passage where Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law, and what the next phrase is it says, and she served them. He heals her, but it says, and she served them. It's always two ways. Sam says this, continue to see the face of Jesus in the despised and the rejected of the world, but you are not their benefactor. You are not the answer to their prayer. They are the answer to yours. You are searching for a salvation that only they can bring. Jesus wired the world this way, that we're to touch. There's healing. There's blessing. There's a lot more I'd like to say about this passage. We don't have nearly enough time. I'll just mention two things in closing. One is in verse 35. It says, what the Gospels repeat over and over and over, it says that Jesus withdrew to a lonely place to pray. Jesus withdrew to a lonely place to pray. I know you probably have good intentions for all your life. You've said, one of these days I'm going to become a person of prayer, but you never quite get it done because why? You have so many responsibilities. You're so busy. That's always interesting. Who could have more responsibility than Jesus, right? Like, He's the Messiah. He's the Son of God. His to-do list is just endless, but Jesus repeatedly in the Gospels withdrew to a lonely place to pray. And he didn't do it to recharge his batteries. He did not do it because prayer works. He did it because he just wanted so badly to be alone with God his Father. He craved that kind of intimacy in solitude with God. And you crave it too. You don't know it. You think you need to go to another party, or you think you need another glass of wine, or you think you need a raise at work, or what is it you think you need? But what you really are craving is just that intimacy with God. Maybe 2016 will be the year that at the end of the year you said, well, this is the year I began to withdraw to a lonely place to pray. And then the last thing is this. The number of times in this passage, in the early chapters of Mark, it uses the word immediately. Immediately, Jesus went to the synagogue. Immediately, Jesus healed him. Immediately, Jesus went to the house. Immediately, Jesus went to the lonely place to pray. Immediately, whatever. There is an immediacy in this story. We adopted a strategic plan a few years ago, and it has all this stuff in it about affordable housing and education, all these things that are important to us. And the last bullet point in our strategic plan is urgency. And we put a staff member's name by each one of them. You know whose name they put next to urgency? They put my name there. Like, are you kidding? I'm responsible for us having a sense of urgency. And there's going to be a sense of urgency. It's got to come from us, the people of God, saying, we've dilly-dallied so long. I mean, I can read your minds. I know for years you've said, one of these days I'm going to volunteer. One of these days I'm going to take a class like Foundation and learn about God. One of these days I'm going to come to a Bible reading. One of these days I'm going to serve. One of these days I'm actually going to touch. But in the meantime, I just don't have time. But your life's flying by you. I mean, this is the year immediately. There's an immediacy to this thing. Sometimes in order to learn this, maybe we need to turn to the elderly. A lot of times people say the elderly are slowing down. This is a lie. The elderly actually are the ones who understand urgency. We discovered this over the holidays. 2 of our beloved in our family suffered health crises. There's a health crisis. It's kind of interesting. You hear about it and you don't think, I need to go see her next summer. Want to have some time off? Nope. What you do is you clear that day's schedule, you get in the car, and you go. And when you get there, what's interesting is the elderly, they got some things on their heart too, and they have things that they've always wanted to say to you, but they don't say, I'm going to write him a letter in the spring or maybe in the fall when I get around to it. No, when there's a crisis, the elderly grab your hand and they say, there's something I've always wanted to say to you. You need to know how much I love you. You need to know how much you mean to me. You need to know how glad I am that you just have come today. There is an urgency. My brothers and sisters, Jesus is the light of the world, and he loves us so much. I think 2016 is the year for you, for me, for all of us to follow him, to love him, to serve him, to touch others, to be healed ourselves. Thanks be to God.